Welcome to week 4 of class, visual storytelling with AI. So up until now, we've used AI models to generate language. But today we're going to treat them as if we are an art director or cinematographer. We'll be looking at tools like Midjourney and DALL-E and Runway and Pika Labs, not just to create pretty pictures, but to build immersive worlds. We'll also discuss that the challenge isn't just about making a single image, it's about maintaining a consistent visual DNA across a narrative, frame by frame. So we talked about all different types of generative AI in week 2, and we know that LLMs are useful for generating text. Diffusion models are best for generating images and video. They start with random digital noise and gradually refine into a clear, structured output through a denoising process. I kind of mentioned it's like kind of like the transporter room in Star Trek things, where you basically change it up and then reassemble it. Now, diffusion models are good at lots of different things. Concept art, key art, style exploration, storyboards, mood boards, 3D modeling, and VFX, visual effects prototyping in film and video. They're usually of very high visual quality. They have a good style and a good range of options. They're pretty good at prompts as well in terms of taking a prompt and doing what you told it to do. Some trade-offs. They have a slow output depending on what you're asking to do. The longer or more complicated, the longer it takes. Controlling fine details can take many iterations. And consistency is hard, but especially in video from frame to frame. It's a big challenge out there. As we talked about in week 2, the prompt starts out like a Star Trek transporter. It's all noise. So if we put a prompt in like a cat in a spacesuit, starts with random static and uses its training to basically clean up the noise slowly and surely until the final image emerges. Image generators are excellent for single frames and creating worlds, without a doubt. Video generators are excellent for specifically short clips. We haven't really got, most clips for video aren't longer than 10 seconds. This gets really costly to do. It's also good for stylized motion and pre-visualization shots as well. A few ones to call out on the image generators. Midjourney has really cinematic aesthetics. It looks like a movie frame or key art from something. They do really well at lighting. So coming up with lighting styles, intentional or practical lighting, different things. Are also good at atmosphere. So in terms of, having fog or haze or dusk or rain in your shot. And then composition as well. They're really good at like composing an image, foreground, background. Maybe you want shallow depth of field where things are blurred out. Does a good job at that. Also good at concept art in terms of generating visual development based on pretty simple directions. Like you might ask for, show me an abandoned mountain resort in winter, or give me a futuristic downtown at dusk. Things like that work really well. It's also good with characters as well, with silhouettes, the costume, the archetypes, the era of styles, and maybe mashing things up to more of a steampunk or something different like that. And then props and vehicles, it does a good job as well. Retro motorcycle or handmade sci-fi gadget or like a ritual death mask. All good at all those kinds of things. Another one I'll mention is DALL-E. The thing I want to call it in DALL-E is something we had talked about in week 2 as well. Really good at in-painting and out-painting. And we talked about in-painting basically is selecting or masking a part of an image to make an edit. Maybe you want to remove a clock or a sign, or you want to change something in it. The rest stays the same, but you're removing that one element. That's in-painting. It's like fast Photoshop, essentially. Out-painting is if you want to extend the image beyond the borders, make it continue the scene naturally. That's also good at cropping or different ratios, like if social or Instagram might be square, TikTok might be vertical, web is different, a slide would be different, a poster art would be different without losing the composition. It's able to go ahead and adapt to those different crops that you might have. It's also, Dolly's really good at graphic design output. So we're thinking about like more professional graphic design than just beautifully painted imagery type of thing. Clear, layout friendly, that kind of stuff. On the video generator side, lots to choose from. I pulled out two that I thought you should mention. One is Runway. It's really known for basically taking text or taking an image and creating video from it, and good at stylized motion. It also has a pretty good workflow that you could basically create pre-visualizations or pitch visuals to go ahead and do it to work there. Pika Labs, another text to video, image to video experiment, really good at short clips. 3D, 2D, impressionistic, realistic, surrealistic. It's good at all that kind of stuff. So really good. Again, we're talking about clips, not long narrative scenes. Video really hasn't mastered any long narrative scenes yet because of style drift, but they're good. They're both good tool generators to use for video. As an example, last year Nano Banana from Google was the hot kind of image generator out there, and it's lots of fun. I've played around with it. It's not available as a standalone app, but you can use it in the Gemini LLM. And here's some examples that had really simple prompts that I had for these. Give me a Japanese style watercolor from the 1800s. Provide me a film noir scene with Ingrid Bergman sitting at a counter. The last one, which is kind of a fun one for me, give me all the great Shakespearean characters standing on the Globe Theater stage. And these all took, under 3 to 5 minutes and less than 10 prompts to go ahead and get it. And the results are really, really nice. On the video side, I've had a chance to work with a lot of them for projects. This one, we worked with Sora, which is a more expensive app that you need an invitation to be able to go ahead and use. But we had a client, Cathay Pacific at Airline, their cargo division, wanted to do a commercial. And here's some of the frames for it, all AI, all generated. The idea is that Cathay Pacific plane is almost like Noah's Ark, with all these different animals getting on board to be shipped. The results are really nice. The client was happy, and I think it looks really good and stands up well if you want to check it out on YouTube or somewhere. But it took a lot of time. So probably over 100 hours of basically computer time generating the 3D video that we needed, and over 500 prompts. This is a 30-second commercial we're talking about. So super challenging. Video takes a long time to create. We had mentioned last week that, many of the issues with the output that you get in any kind of generative AI comes down to brief failure. So you don't have very good prompts or not detailed enough prompts. So you really want to focus on the idea that your prompts are good. And 3 of the things we talked about previously there: task and goal in your prompts, the audience, the context, the constraints, and the format. All those are important because, again, the model that you're using can't read your mind. It can only read your prompts. So you have to be clear and specific in your creative direction. And again, if you're unhappy with the output, don't just ask it to regenerate something. Improve your brief first. We talked about these things and everything. This is a strong visual prompt. We talked about what was a strong language LLM prompt last week. Here's some of the things that we talk about with regard to that. There's a hierarchy, and you kind of work down from this list. The subject, again, who or what's in focus, the action you want them to do, the setting, when, where, that type of thing, the style that you want to go, the camera. We'll talk more about that, but what's the framing of the shot? What kind of lens might you be using to go ahead and get this image? The lighting, the composition, and then the constraints. We've talked about constraints before. What to avoid in your shot. And basically we go down, but we start with the subject, then we figure out the scene. That's the action, setting, and style, basically. Then we get into the camera shot. Then we get into style, which could be lighting and style, or just lighting or composition. And then we get into constraints out there. And that's kind of the workflow we do. But again, you start with the subject first, and you kind of build on that as you write the paragraph. So here's an example of a good visual prompt. All the key elements we talked about are there. So a lone busker playing violin in a neon lit subway tunnel with late night rain reflection on the floor. That's got a subject, it's got an action, and it's got a setting. Then adding additional details once we've established that. We add another layer. Cinematic wide shot because of the composition. Using a 35mm lens and shallow depth of field. That's the camera. Then we has a teal orange color grade, soft haze, practical lights, and a subtle film grade. That's the lighting and color. Then finally, we always add the constraints in at the end. No text, no logos, no extra hands. I throw the no extra hands thing in there because past image and video generators had this problem of having the wrong number of fingers or extra hands on things. They've kind of worked that out, but it can sometimes still be an issue. The best way to look at this is, much like we did with the LLMs, come up with a few different templates of what you want to use over and over, and that'll give you the best results. Again, the lens and the lighting and the color palette will definitely give you a consistency without a doubt. So, example, I put that prompt into a variety of different image generators. I use Stable Diffusion and Midjourney on this one, just kind of curious what might come up. And this was the busker in the subway playing a violin with the things. Same prompt, but very different results. Midjourney kind of nailed the look and the lighting and the shot. Stable Diffusion, certainly creative, but who knew it was going to be a neon violin and not a neon kind of light area type of thing. So this comes down to, when we talk about that, the idea of visual DNA. So you want to basically embed your prompt with a repeatable set of choices that makes the images like they come from the same world. So when you start putting image after image or video clip after video clip, you want to make sure they all feel like they're from the same place. That's where that visual DNA comes in. You want it to be consistent. And I think that's one of the biggest issues with new people, students using AI. The inconsistency. Characters change, the lighting changes, the color palette changes, the textures change. Embedding and having in your prompt the visual DNA information reduces that drift. And there's a few things there. There's a style DNA and there's a character DNA as well. So the style DNA would be, again, the palette. And you don't want to pick every color under the sun. I try to limit myself to about 5 colors and stick to them and have them in every prompt I have. Then the lighting. Where does the lighting come from? You just can't say good lighting. You have to choose where the lighting is. A key light, a fill light, a backlight. That's where that cinematography language comes in. And then choose a vibe. Do you want really harsh noon sunlight or maybe rainy afternoon, cloudy day? Those look very, very different. Then lens and depth of field. Again, that's another film vocabulary that really helps with AI prompts. You want to decide where in the world this lives. So does it have a wider lens? So wider lens is like a 24mm or a 35mm, kind of give you that epic wider shot. While portrait lenses are like a 50mm or an 85mm, those are more really flattering to the face. So you have to learn a little bit about cinematography and film vocabulary to be able to figure out what is the lens that you want to use, but the lens choice really resonates with diffusion models and image and video generators. Texture and grain. So how sharp is it? Is there grain? Is it gritty? Is it really painterly? Is it clean? Is it glossy? What's the surface of your world? You want to make sure you have that. And adding texture makes a real difference in your prompts, because if you put the same prompt in 5 different render engines, they might all look the same. If you put that in there, it's going to give a style to it, which is really important. Compositional things, aspect ratio. What's the size of the screen? Is it traditional TV with a 16:9 screen? Is it a square like you have on Instagram? Is it portrait? So more of a vertical landscape. Again, telling what you want the frame size to be is really important because then they'll compose the images within that frame. Really important thing. So that's style DNA. There's also character DNA. Again, even probably more with characters than you will have with an overall style. You get that drift, that style drift, where between shots, the hair changes in terms of color or length. The age might change. The clothes they're wearing might change. Or even when you're interpreting personality, like movement and gestures in video, they can change as well. So there's ways to basically embed a DNA into your characters. One is physical anchors. These are things that are non-negotiable, that basically are identity markers like the hair, the face, maybe the silhouette. And you pick 3 to 5 key physical anchors that you want to have. If you pick too many, then you confuse the model and won't know what to do. If you don't have enough, you get that style drift. Wardrobe. It's like being a costume designer. You want to anchor the character with 1 or 2 items, a coat, a shirt, a dress, whatever. And then you want to have the consistent color palette with it as well. That gives you continuity even when you change scenes. Behavior anchors are what the character does. Their posture, their energy, their habits. It makes the character feel like the same person regardless of what they're wearing, where they're standing, or whatever the light changes are. Emotion range. This is a really important one, I think, as well, because if you don't pick the emotion you're going to get there, AI has a tendency to over-dramatize it or provide no emotion whatsoever. So it's either big smile or nothing. So you want to have an idea of the palette of feelings your character is going to have. Maybe 2 or 3 expressions is what you want to work with. That's the biggest. But you don't want to have no emotion in your character. Then forbidden changes. Forbidden changes are much like the constraints we talked about before. These are things that can never change, that can never vary. So you put things like do not change hair color or hair length. Do not change their age. Do not change their ethnicity. A lot of students skip this part, but it's the most powerful guardrail because then you're going to have more consistency between image to image or from video clip to video clip. An example might be for something I'm using. It's kind of combining a little bit of both. Red jacket, short dark hair, rainy neon city, 35mm lens, teal or orange lighting, soft haze, film grain. Just something like that. So I didn't pick everything, all the bullet points, but I picked enough there to give the AI something to work with and make sure it's consistent from shot to shot. We talked about, again, the importance of a good prompt. Style locks are ways you can use it. And that text I just gave you about the red coat and the lighting and everything is a way to look at it. But you can break it down into like 6 different categories there. You've got the palette lock, which is basically telling me the color palette, or if it's contrasty. The lens lock, again, what kind of lens it is, the texture, soft haze, glossy, the lighting, overcast, bright sunny, composition, and aspect ratio. When you pick those things, you're going to get a style consistency to what you're doing, which is very, very important. The other thing is, don't pick a look midway through your generation of images. You want to have that early. And then don't improvise. Consistency is going to come from the repetition of that. If you don't like the direction it's going, start a whole new workflow. But don't try to change things halfway through. You'll be disappointed with what you get. So again, we had this visual prompt I mentioned, but I didn't have any style DNA or character DNA in it. So if I add it there, so I added some style constraints into it, especially with lighting and aspect ratio and color. The iteration from Stable Diffusion from image 1 to image 2 is much better. There is some problems with it because if you look at it, the shot, it looks like the subway is going to run over the violinist because there's not really a track for the subway. So there's still work to be done, but from one iteration to the second, it's not bad. One of the great things about AI is building new worlds. And that's just a matter of creating pretty pictures. It's really creating a world that has a story behind it. But to do that, you have to put some structure and work behind it. We usually call that a world Bible, which sets the rules for your prompts that you must obey to be consistent. If you don't have a world Bible, you're just going to create inconsistent, mushy visuals. It's just not going to look good, and it's not going to be something you can use. You really need to start with a world Bible to really have things started. So some of the things we look at there are, where are we? The geography. When are we? The era, the mood, what's normal in this world, what's not what's forbidden in this world, materials and textures you might want to use, the color palette, weather and atmosphere, and the technology level. All those things are great. And you don't have to pick all of them, but the more you pick, the more tightly constrained the prompt is going to be and the better results you're going to get. And in some cases, you only, for a palette, for example, you might pick a couple adjectives like sun-bleached or rusted or quietly haunted. Any of those would kind of work as a style thing there. Again, we've mentioned this before, world building is kind of like being a cinematographer, being a filmmaker, because you're creating lots of shots from lots of different angles, just like a film crew would. And some of the things that you would do with that world building to be able to show it is mood boards, so different kinds of fields for it, maybe including what the colors look like, which is what you have there on the left. Also textures and other references. Keyframes, maybe 3 to 6 moments of the story that you feel like look like stills from a film. Environmental concepts, are your interior, exterior variations of the main locations, inside the house, outside the house, on the porch, those types of things. Prop and signage studies, things that make the world believable. Posters, currency, interfaces, symbols, anything that would make the world look more realistic. And then character sheets, which we can talk more in a second, but again, consistent face, body, costume of the character with multiple angles and probably in multiple settings will all help your world building elements. If you want to think about it, you think it as a prompt again, and you start broad and you get more specific. So when you do that, you're going to get better results. So 3 layers, an establishing shot, then adding details, then adding prompts. You can all have that all in one big prompt, or you can break it up into separate prompts. But that's going to keep your visuals coherent and story driven instead of just getting random cool images that you can't kind of put together. So as mentioned, the establishing shot, where we are, what the tone feels like. That can be weather, mood, place, time. And I have there a foggy harbor, town at dawn, salt air, quiet dread, wide shot 24mm lens, desaturated blues, soft backlight. Once we do that, we get into some of the details. So how the close-ups that might look in that world. So again, we're getting into things like reveals of material, the era. So it could be things like a rusty ticket machine or a decaying building, whatever would help and that kind of thing. So I have there a close-up of a rusty ticket machine with handwritten warnings, cracked in animal, 1970s typography, and rain streaks. So really getting into some specific details for that location. And finally, the props. Although the rusty ticket machine is technically a prop, the props that the heroes might carry. So it could be maybe a watch that has a second compartment, or a big overcoat that has other pockets. But when you describe the prop, you want to mention the shape, the material, if it's damaged, and what it means. You want to give the AI enough constraints to make something specific, and also give you a reason for your audience to notice it. So again, the workflow starts wide to define the world. You move to close-ups to prove what the world has in it. Then you design an object that connects with the world to the character and the stakes. That's going to help. It's a mini lookbook, essentially, that basically tells you about the story. Character concept, character building, very similar to world building. You want to align what your characters look like very quickly on with kind of the mood board things, with the colors, with what they're wearing, what they look like in different settings. all that's important. So you want to make sure you have that thing aligned so that your story and the style and production choices all pull in the same direction as you move forward. If you don't do that, you're going to spend a lot of time and money trying to reduce errors or deal with tweaks, and that can be very costly to do. We start with like a character sheet. So that's kind of a full, clean body of the person, front view, but you can do side view as well. Shows us the person, the gear, their costume. Again, I mentioned palette swatches. Just gives you a quick shorthand for the colors being used on that. Use a reference image. So if you have something that you like, use that when a tool supports it. Lock in 2 to 3 things that are going to always be happening. Maybe the hair, maybe the silhouette, kind of shape of the person, maybe a jacket might be one as well. When you're doing the face, you want to describe the face the same way every time so it gets it. And then generate in batches. And then from that batch, pick the best one that you want it to be the best look for it. What doesn't work when you're doing character building are super long prompts that have competing descriptions. So the AI really doesn't know how to deal with that. Or you're having your character change their hairstyle or wardrobe after each shot. That's going to be confusing the AI. Or there are big camera angle shifts. You go from an extreme wide shot where the character is small in frame to a tight close-up. Again, there's nothing tying the 2 images, so AI really doesn't know how to make that look consistent. Those are all important things. You heard me talk about cinematic. You'll hear cinematic used a lot of times with image and video generators. We're talking about filmmaking. We're talking about the camera decisions. What makes film cinematic is the style, the composition, the color, the tone that we're seeing on the screen. So that can be oftentimes how close we are, what the framing of the shot is, and also what the angle is of the shot. Those shots change meaning, and knowing how to do it is important. Shot sizes, they're telling us what to see. An extreme wide shot just gives us information, doesn't really tell us anything. While an extreme close-up or a close-up tells us really what that character is feeling right now. That's a big deal. Camera angles also can tell us how we feel. If we are at a real high angle shot looking down at a character, that makes that character look insignificant or small, as opposed to a low angle, which makes them look very dominating and intense. So by that angle you pick, you're making a judgment, you're providing meaning on what that is. So the prompts bridge from still to motion, and you can use a lot of the prompts you use in image generation into video generation as well. Lens and depth, we talked about that. Again, that's a really important one, how you want to use it. One thing you can add to lens and depth is, because it's motion with video, is a handheld jerky shot versus a nice smooth shot would be one thing you could add into that as well. The lighting and grade. So again, very similar stuff that we'd have for image generation. How do you want it to look? Beautiful golden hour backlight at like sunset. Or film noir, really hard, dark shadows. The background's in darkness, the foreground is really bright and no fall off. Neon, a high key, so light source coming from above looks nice and friendly and bright. A low key underneath the subject, dark and moody. And finally, again, the movement. So what kind of camera movement you're using will determine what that shot means. And movement always has meaning within video and film. So if you're zooming in on something, you're focusing on that. Tilting up or down, you're suggesting size or power. To pan one direction, you're slowly revealing information. A dolly in, which is like a zoom, but physically moving the camera versus just using an optical zoom, can be discovery or tension or dread. A tracking shot is camera moving basically parallel to the action. That can be energy or momentum or following, especially in like running or walking shots. And a whip pan or a crash zoom, things like that. It's a transition device that you could use. So what you could do for something like that, for this whole thing, you could basically, for a video shot, Give me a slow dolly in with an 85mm lens, shallow depth of field, golden hour lighting, and a soft haze, and you basically have everything covered there. Storyboarding is a really important thing that you can do with image and video generation. Here's a practical way to go ahead and use it. Basically, think of storyboards as like a thumbnail generator for AI. We're not looking for final, beautiful frames. We're looking for clarity of the story, coverage, and timing. Again, knowing your cinematic vocabulary will help on this, but it's pretty simple on this one. On the left, you're seeing a simple sequence. You have a hero facing a dragon, and then you have 7 frames after that explaining what happens. And there's the workflow on the other side, basically. So you create a story beat. And that story beats aren't images. It's like things that happen. It's the simplest version of the story. So like our hero approaches the dragon. That could be 1 shot. That could be 3 shots. A wide shot, and over the shoulder, and a close-up. So we want to explain what happens and why. But you want to keep it short in the story beats. Kind of a setup, escalation of the moment, a turning point, and a payoff is what you look at. So for this one, the outline might be our hero enters a ruined temple. Heat and ash are in the air. The dragon reveals itself, massive silhouette and flame. The hero draws the sword. A moment of fear becomes resolve. The dragon lunges. The hero dodges. Sparks and embers fly. And then we see both of them eye to eye, the moment there. The hero strikes, and we feel the impact of the shot. Then we cut to the aftermath. A wide shot, the world reset, maybe the dragon is dead. Each story beat there implies a visual, and that's the point. You take those story beats, you create a shot list for it, using the cinematic language we talked about. And remember, a beat does not equal a single shot. It's frequently more than that. Beat 1, where we basically have the hero entering the ruined temple. That could be something along the lines of an establishing shot, wide, a detail insert, and maybe a close-up of the dragon's eyes or the hero's eyes. So 3 shots. Beat 2, revealing what's happening, a wide silhouette, hero reaction, close-up. Go on back and forth. That decision moment, that key moment with the stop about what's going to happen. Maybe you have an extreme close-up of both characters, the dragon and the hero, and then something happens. Your shot list is your real deliverable. The images are just a fast visual to check out there. So it's great work for pre-visualization and also commercials and animations and all sorts of things. Storyboarding can help. 1 frame per shot, so you don't need to go overboard on it, and you don't need to write a novel or complicated prop. Basically, have the subject, add the action, add the camera, and then add the mood. That's what you want to have there. And then you can add whatever world building clues you want, the location, the era, the weather, the color palette, things like that. So 1, for example, what could a prompt be for this, for one of the shots? It could be a medium close-up of the red-haired knight raising a sword, embers floating in the air, orange firelight in the background, 50mm lens, shallow depth of field, cinematic contrast, and warm highlights. So that's a pretty good first prompt for this. Now remember, your first generation is rarely the one you're going to go with. You have to do multiple iterations of every frame to get something that's going to communicate the shot. So don't get frustrated. It takes time to go ahead and make this happen. Now, if you wanted to, you could take all of these frames you created and then create an animatic. So you're just basically laying those on an editing timeline with however long they are, and you're basically creating what the sequence will look like. It's good for timing and pacing and clarity so we understand what's going on, possibly shot rhythm as well. So even with still images and not using video clips, you still get the idea of what's happening in the scene. The other thing is consistency. We talked about this visual DNA. You want to repeat the same visual DNA line, the character, the palette, the lens. That's the secret to making sure the storyboard feels like one world and is consistent. You want to be consistent. Use that short phrase in every prompt you do. Include that same DNA in every shot prompt. That's how you reduce style drift. If you have reference images, that can help, because they anchor the identity and style. And the reference images can be everything from a character portrait you like to maybe a keyframe from something that nails the look, or palette reference, or a location concept, whatever. Using the references changes the process from an AI prompting from scratch to basically directing it to follow something. So that's a big help. And then I mentioned before, you're going to regenerate individual frames. Creating images and video take time, and you will regenerate a lot of content. The goal is not perfection, especially on the first few ones. It's clear composition, consistent character, and readable action. And then if you have a frame that you're doing, everything else looks good, and one frame's off, maybe you have the wrong face or the wrong armor or some weird anatomy, like they're too tall and thin now when they weren't before. Just regenerate that one frame rather than rebuilding the whole sequence. It's a good way to do it. And again, so you're building story beats, shot list, still frames, and animatic. Creative work is the choices you're making on there and making sure you have that visual DNA to make sure everything's consistent as well. Winning workflow. So the workflow that we think about a lot of times is, again, your concept, come up with one sentence of what it is. The mood board's going to be 6 images that you're going to use on it. The character, we talked about building a character sheet. The storyboard is going to give you more detail type of thing there going on. And then the animatic for the timing of the scene. And there's different tools you can use for this. For images, Midjourney, DALL-E, Nano Banana, others are good for mood boards, character sheets, props, keyframes. They work for all those. For video, Runway, Pika, Sora, they're good for short motion tests, stylized shots. Then for editing, you can edit on anything. Adobe Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, QuickTime, the Final Cut Pro on Macs, any of those will work just fine. Discussion 3. So discussion 3 is basically giving your experience of, when you're using these AI image or video generations, what were some of your reactions to it? And some important questions I'd like to consider on that. It's in the canvas. Who's the author? You, the machine, or the developers behind the model? What makes an AI-generated visual authentic? Where do you draw the line between inspiration and imitation and appropriation? So there's a line between those things, inspiration, imitation, and appropriation. Things to think about, that will be your discussion topic for this week. You also have a workshop this week as well, where you're going to be using an AI image or video generation tool to create a visual sequence. I'm not looking for cool images. I'm looking for kind of a thing with purpose through prompt design, sequencing, and refinement. I want to see that you understand consistency in building something there. You're going to generate a series of images or video clips using a generative AI tool of your choice, and you have different options to choose from. You can option A is creating a mood board or visual theme. Option B is creating a storyboard or narrative sequence. And option C is more of an experimental series of images or video. Abstract, thematic, rhythmic, different types of things. Lots of tools that you'll require. There's a whole list on there, but you can use any of the ones we mentioned today. Midjourney, DALL-E, Runway, Pika Labs, Firefly, Nano Banana, all sorts of stuff. What you really want to focus on are the prompts. Again, creating images and creating videos take time, so you're going to have to use prompts. So you should not have any less than 3 distinct prompt variations to use your sequence. You can have a lot more if you want to. And then you shouldn't just regenerate from a prompt. You can do it once or twice, but the idea is you are tweaking your prompt and making things better until you get something that really looks good. Perfect would be ideal. This will help you really understand real-world creative. And that is it for week 4. Have fun. This is probably one of the funnest weeks of class where you get to play around with image and video generation tools and enjoy yourself.